Hi everyone, this is Marnie with MarnieMadeIt.com, and today I'm going to make a simple chunky knit hat that's been modified with a hole in the top. So it's perfect to wear with a messy bun or a ponytail. Of course I have neither, but I know people who would wear these and could wear these, and it's just a fun project to make. It's easy to do, great for beginners. So let's go ahead and get started. I just wanted to show you quickly what the crocheted border looks like. When we start this piece, we don't do any ribbing. We just start to knit. And so what happens is it'll roll up, which is fine if that's the effect you want. But when I finished it, because it was sort of rolling up, I decided to add this border. And this is a single crochet around it. And it also kind of gives it a nice finish, I think. Anyway, that's the look I was going for, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video. Also wanted to show you quickly what the inside looks like so you can see that there's a seam. And there it is. Now, either it's because of this yarn or because of my amazing sewing skills, I don't know, but you can hardly tell, if at all, that there is a seam there. And that's also very desirable. And sometimes, of course, you could do something knitted in the round on double pointed needles, but sometimes that can be hard. And, you know, not for everyone. So I decided just to do a straight knitting and sew a seam and hide it as best I could. So there you go. Now let's get started. Okay, so now we're ready to begin the hat with a casting on of 40 stitches. So I've got my long tail and I make my slip knot. And this is the long tail cast on method that I use. You can certainly cast on other ways. If you want to know how to do this method, you can catch my video on this channel showing how to do the long tail cast on. We're going to add 40 stitches. So there's 1, there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Okay, so that's our cast on, and now we are simply going to knit the first row, purl the second, and go on like that for about 7 inches. So I'll knit the first 2 rows with you, and then you can pause the video and catch up with me after you've knit 7 inches. But let's go ahead and knit so you can see how I do it. Again, this is my method of knitting, which may be different from yours. There is a way to knit where you hold the yarn in your right hand and basically throw it over that needle. But I find this technique for me helps me to stay even, and actually I think I can knit faster. So this is, I'm not sure what it's called. I learned it when I lived in Germany because I actually started to learn how to knit when I was 14. believe it or not. And when there was no internet and I had to go to the library and check out a book. And the book I had, the book that I borrowed, showed the method of holding the yarn in your right hand and throwing it over the needle. And so that's what I knew until I was about 18 and I went to Germany and saw everybody knitting so fast, and it looked like it was much more efficient. So I asked my friend to teach me, and she did, and it took me a couple weeks to change, but I am so glad I did, because I feel it just saves a lot of time, and I actually do think it makes your work look more even. At least mine does, anyway. Okay, so we're about at the end of the row, the first row of knitting, and so now we're going to purl the next row. Last stitch there. Okay, so here we are, and now we are going to purl. So the yarn comes in the front, and we come from the back of that front loop and purl. I love this little hat because it's so great to just use up. You don't even need a full skein, honestly. It's probably more like a half a skein. In fact, you could probably do 2 hats with 1 skein. And so it's a good way to use up. And you don't have to use one color, you know. You could do a different color border. And, you know, blend your any leftover chunky yarn that you have. It's kind of how the pattern became. That's how the pattern was born. Anyway, so here is the first 2 rows. So now you'll just need to repeat that. Knit 1 row and purl 1 row until you've got about 7 inches. And then meet me back here and we'll continue with the crown. Okay, so now we're at the point where we have knit 7 inches worth of rows here. And 7 inches for me turns out to be 22 rows. But I just wanted to show you as I lay so you can see how I'm measuring. I'm not really stretching it, I'm just laying it flat. And so right there is 7 inches. And that for me is the spot where I want the crown to kind of start. And remember too, you're going to have a few rows of border, or 2 rows of border to be exact, or a single crochet, you know, a little extra down here. Okay, so now we are ready to start the crown. And so to do that, we're going to be decreasing. And decreasing on this project is just simply knitting 2 together. So we're going to start with, let me just adjust the camera here. Okay, so we're going to start by knitting the first stitch. Okay, and then we're going to knit the next 2 together. Knit those 2 together. Okay, so let's do it again. Now we're going to knit 2. So we knit the first stitch, knit 2 together, and then knit 2. 1, 2. So now we're just going to repeat knit 2 together and knit 2 until we get to the last stitch. Okay, so we just knitted 2. So now we're going to knit 2 together and then knit 1 and 2. Again, knit 2 together and knit 1 and 2. Okay, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2, knit 2 together, one, knit two, knit two together, knit one, knit two, knit two together, knit one and two, knit two together, knit one and two, knit two together, knit one and two, and knit two together, and now we are at the last stitch, which we will just knit. So now you should have 30 stitches. We went from 40 to 30. We decreased by 10 stitches on that row. So the next row, so this would be the second row of the crown, is going to be simply purling. So we're not changing anything, we're not decreasing anymore. We're just gonna purl this row straight. Okay, so I'll just do with me here. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And there's 30 stitches. Okay, we're gonna decrease another row this time a little bit differently. We're gonna again decrease by 10, but the way it's distributed is we're going to knit one, knit two together, and just repeat that all the way to the end. So knit one, knit two together, knit one, two together, whoops, one, knit two together, okay. Well, and at the end it's knit one and knit the last two together. And we should have 20 stitches on this, on the needle now. Let's see. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. That looks like 21. Let's see here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I miscounted, right. So that's the next decrease row. And now we're going to purl. Just simply purl like we did before. No changes to the stitch count. It's going to still end up with 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sure I'm still focused here. Okay. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, oops, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, well that's it for the decrease portion. And now the next 2 rows are the last 2 rows of this hat, believe it or not. And all we have to do now is what I've done in this hat. What I did was I did a little seed stitch, 2 rows. And a seed stitch, if you don't know, is simply knit 1, purl 1, and then the reverse side is you knit and purl the same stitches, and what happens is you get sort of like a checkerboard. So I don't know how else to explain it, seed stitch. So we're going to do that for 2 rows. So the first row is going to be knit, purl, all the way down. Knit, purl, knit and purl, knit and purl. And then we've done our 20 stitches. Now we're going to turn it to the wrong side. Now on the wrong side, since the first stitch here was we actually, let's see, the first stitch here is the last stitch on the other side, which was a purl. So we're going to purl it, and this will in other words, we're going to do the reverse, because it looks like you should knit this one, but we're not. We're going to purl it. So we're basically purling the knit stitches and knitting, which I just did, the purl stitch. So here's it wants us to knit, but we're going to purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, purl, okay, and the last one is a knit, and that is the end of it. Now you've got your basic, that's the hat. That's basically it. And now we're going to cast this off. And once we cast that off, then we're going to sew up the seam, and then we're going to add our little border. So meet me back here and we'll start casting off. Okay, now we're ready to cast off this piece. So we finished the purl side, so we're starting with the knit side, the right side. And so you can cast off just by knitting every stitch. The first one, we're just going to slip off, and then we're going to knit, and we're going to pass this one, the first stitch, over the next, and that's how we cast off. Again, knit one and pass over, knit one, pass over. one, pass over. That's Hank getting a drink of water, by the way. New one, pass over. And then the last stitch, knit and pass over. Okay, and that's the cast off top. I'm going to take our scissors, cut the tail, pull it through the loop to fasten off. Okay, so there is our hat. Now what we're going to do is sew the seam. So I'm going to show you how I do that. And I'm just going to take a little pause here and get myself situated with my needle, and we can sew it up together. Okay, so now we're ready to sew up the seam. And I do this, and this is, again, my technique for doing this is to first stitch it together, and then second go over and hide it, or as best I can. And I'll just have to show you how I do this. You may have your own technique, but this is how I do my sewing. So I want to just, here's the end. So I'm just going to come from the other side into that first stitch and secure that. Like that. And so I basically go around lining up the rows. And I take the inside, the very end, the very last loop of the stitch, and go this way. Try lining them up as best I can. I mean, you want to try, and I like to try to do it so it's not too bulky on the inside. So I start with this technique, and then when I turn it over, then I can see how it looks, and that's how I know if I need to go through it. Well, I'll just show you how I do it. So I'm basically just taking the last loop of each side and matching them up and going around and around. Just like so. Looks like my tail is just going to be long enough, hopefully, to finish. Still on the camera here. There we go. When you get to the end, kind of make sure that you've got the right amount, the right length going on here. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know, and this yarn is very forgiving because there's so much going on in the yarn that you can't really see. You know, you don't have to be completely, you can fudge it, in other words. All right, we're getting towards the end. Couple more. There's my tail. There's my last stitch. Okay, and then the last one. So that's basically that holds it in shape, and I've got it. Now let's turn it inside out and look and see. So now you can see there's, you know, there's this. Obviously you can tell that that's a seam. Well, I don't really like that, so here's what I do. I fold it back out. I mean, it's not bad, but I found another way of closing this up. So I get another long piece of yarn, and thread my needle. Now I'm going to start at the top. So let's see what I've got going on here. Here's my top. Let's start here. Let's start at the bottom. All right. So I'm on the right side, and you can kind of see that. Now here's the other side of the loop. I sewed first the inside of the loop, and now I'm gonna just kind of go this way, but instead of wrapping it, I'm gonna go back and forth, and I'm not gonna do it too tightly, so it's going to look more like this. Now I've kind of closed that gap, so I go back and forth from one side to the other. And then, you know, look at it, pull it a little bit, and you'll see, you know, that that's closing it up quite nicely. At least for me, this works. And this is how I do it, so. I think by sewing it on the inside first and then doing this, it's just easier for me to, you know, to have it more matched up. But again, if you feel like you want to comment or you have a different technique that you like to use, please share. I would love to know how other people do their seams. Okay, almost done. You can kind of see how it's looking. So I feel like it looks more like it's an actual row. I mean, you know, yeah, it's not like, you don't really see that gap anymore. And it kind of hides the sewing part. Now we're getting to where we have our crown. just going to turn it around. Let's see here. I think that's gonna do it for me. I mean, I think that's about where I want it to be. Maybe one more right here. Oh, it looks like there's a hole here. I don't like that, so I'm gonna have to fix that, which I will do. Okay, let's take this off the needle and see what we have going on. Okay, there's our seam. That's going to close that up. I just have a little puka here, a little hole that I want to cover up. So I'm going to come back down on the inside. And I'm going to make my way over here and find a stitch that I can use to sort of weave in and out, and then close that up. There we are. Okay, and that's it. That is the end of the seaming. Now we've just got to hide our ends, okay? So let's go ahead and hide our ends. I'm gonna take a break and I'll start back and we'll hide the end. Okay, so I have my work inside out, and I was just, after I sewed the seam, I was just kind of playing with it, stretching it, you know, letting the stitches kind of go where they will go once it's being worn. And now I'm just going to try and hide or weave in the ends here and cut them off. Okay, so let's see. And again, I mean, there are ways, you may have other techniques for weaving in ends. I try to go along, I try to make sure that what I'm weaving isn't going to be seen from the outside, right? And again, this is very forgiving yarn because it varies. So it's really easy to just hide the stitches, and then of course you can just go along the seam here and hide them. And there's one. And here's this short one here. And remember too that we are going to be adding a border at the other side once we're all done here. Okay, I'm going to hide that. Let's just cut this. I don't need that long piece here. Kind of closing this gap a little bit by weaving these ends here. And I'm just going to go ahead and make my way back to the seam. Okay. All right, I think one more. This one I'm just gonna push through here. There we go. And that is our seam. I know it doesn't look so pretty on the inside, but really I'm telling you it'll be fine when you're actually wearing the hat. So again, just kind of letting the yarn find its place. And I fold it inside out. And let's see how our hat looks. Okay, here's our seam, which you can kind of see it there, but it's not that noticeable. I think it looks just fine. And when you wear the hat, you'll obviously put this on the back and your messy bun will be up here. So this will be the back part of your hat. And that is the messy bun hat. So now the final step is to add a little border on the bottom. So I'll be right back and we'll go ahead and do that with our crochet hook. Okay, now we're ready to add our single crochet border. So I have a size J hook and I've got my yarn. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to find, we'll start with the seam since that's the back part. And I'm gonna find a back loop. You can kind of see, if you look at the bottom of the hat, that there is a front loop and a back loop. I am gonna take the back loop and I'm gonna work all the back loops. So to start with, I take my yarn. I don't need a long tail because it's crochet. So it's different from when you knit and cast on. You just have a short tail. And I'm gonna put the slip knot on my hook. Actually, I'm gonna start this way. We're going to make a slip knot, backing up, put your hook through the back loop, tighten that slip knot onto your hook, and pull it through that back loop. And I'm going to chain one, and then in the same loop I'm going to do a single chain. So I'm going to do that all the way around. Here's the back loop of this stitch, and this makes it where you can see single chain, that there's a little ridge there. So again, a single chain is putting it through the back, bringing it up, pulling it through the two. Putting it through the back loop, pulling up the yarn, yarning over and pulling it through those two. Single chain. That's the single chain. It's pretty easy. The thing I will say though is that you don't want to do this part too tight because this is the part that's going to be on your forehead. And so you want to have as much give as possible. The hat is pretty stretchy, but you do want to try and not make this too tight. So just loosely do your single chains. And if you get to the end and it's too tight, you can just take it out and start over. It's not a big deal. It's a lot easier to take out a crochet row than a knitted row. All right, we are almost done. Whoops. Make sure I'm still in the focus there. Whoops. Okay, we're coming up to the last couple of loops here. You can see that's where I've started. So I've got probably 2 more, and also you'll see you might run across some of the seam stitches, which you can just crochet in to make it, you know, the best way you can. There we go. And so now we're going to just slip stitch to join. I'm going to slip it under the 2 loops of that single chain, and I'm going to pull it through and then slip stitch, cut my yarn, and pull it through. Now all that's left is to hide these ends right here, and then our hat is finished. It's turning out quite nicely, I think. And be creative in how you hide your ends. I know I am. But this seam works just great. There. All right, one more little one here. That's all I'm gonna do for that. All right. So again, there's our back seam. Let's see if we can see closer if I try to. Not too noticeable. This is a great way to make a hat if you don't want to knit in the round and you know you have trouble doing it, or you just haven't learned how to yet, or you don't have the needles. You know, you can make a hat in one piece, and you can make it fit a messy bun as well.